in the whole 6010.
Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways you could save. It's Friday, September 23rd. We are getting ready for week 3. I am Field. She is Stefania. He is Mike. Good morning, Stefania.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, I think.
Someone's calling me right now at 10 a.m. on the nose. Apparently, it is.
Actually,
apparently
yeah.
not a big watcher of the Fantasy Focus podcast. Good morning, Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm way over here. I'm usually there. I can't really hear you. I'm getting older. Hearing's going.
Yeah.
I always have this thing in my ear blasting sounds. So I'm losing the hearing. So I have you on speaker here so I could hear you from both sides.
Okay, that makes more sense. So Mike is calling me from 6 feet away to try to figure out whether or not we can communicate during the show. We're going to preview every game and talk about last night's game for a minute. A reminder, we do it like this. Lineup locks plus players that have injury question marks plus players that are just question marks in general because we're not sure whether they should start or sit this week. That includes the likes of Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers this week. Stay tuned for more. Let's dive into Thursday Night Football recap, though. The Browns are now 2-1. They get a 29-17 win. And before we get to the recap, just really, really fun play at the very end of this game. The Browns, who have already won the game. Depends what side you're on. I want to know, Tuesday morning, if this impacts your matchup, I want you to tweet at me, at Field Yates on the old Twitter machine. Let me know, because there was massive consequences in the very final play of the game. The Steelers, desperation play needed. They're down by 6. They need the opportunity to go ahead and potentially, on a miracle, tie the game up, pending the extra point. They could win the game. So what do? They throw the ball to Deontay Johnson. He picks up 8 yards. He laterals it to Chase Claypool, who loses 6 yards. He laterals it to Najee Harris, who loses 4 yards, who then fumbles. He tries to keep the play alive and is scored a fumble, but the Browns pick it up. They recover in the end zone for a touchdown. A wild game that has all sorts of fantasy ramifications. Can't wait to see how that one impacts matchups come Tuesday morning. Let's get to the nitty-gritty of this game. Nick Chubb remains awesome. 113 yards on the ground. He didn't need a catch because he still had those 113 yards and a touchdown, a lineup lock every single week. Kareem Hunt was fine. Yeah.
If you want to see a guy, I want to talk about Nick Chubb for a second, because Jonathan Taylor, when I asked him who his 5 top running backs in the league were, Nick Chubb came straight away. Yeah. And it's not necessarily who we would all think of, but he said, if you look at a guy who is trying to stay, if you look at how strong he is in his lower body, it is so critical to a running back to stay healthy, because it's so hard for people to bring him down, and it's hard to. He thought that he extended his career potential by being as strong as he is in his legs.
Yeah, he is absurd. Remember those videos from the offseason of him squatting 600 pounds? The guy squat about 60 pounds. He makes it look easy, as do I with the 60 NBD. But Kareem Hunt, his running mate, had 9.1 fantasy points. He gets 3 catches last night. This night could have looked a lot better if he cashed in one of 3 straight goal line carries. So he kind of remains what he is, right? We had the conversation yesterday. He's a borderline flex play that some weeks is going to cash in with a touchdown. Some weeks is going to be more like that 9.1 point range. Not a terrible
big week
option.
1, under 10 points the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
So that's what you're going to get.
But here's where I think it's interesting for the Browns is back-to-back great weeks for Amari Cooper. Mike, has your confidence grown enough in Jacoby Brissett that Cooper could potentially be a top 20 or 25 wide receiver this year?
It has, and I'll tell you why. 31%
target share, right?
That's absurd. Right, that's a career high by far. We've talked about this throughout the offseason. Last year he was at 19% in Dallas, and that was a career low.
Yeah.
And now you're scratching your head. Why would they do something like that? And again, that's a criticism we've had of the Dallas offense. Like CeeDee Lamb too. Where are the targets for your top receivers? They haven't been there, and Cooper's getting them now.
Yep.
And Jacoby Brissett is overachieving our expectations, and that's going to be enough for him. So after back-to-back 100-yard games, you have to actually, he has 10+ targets, 100+ yards, and a touchdown in back-to-back games. You don't bench that.
Yeah, first Browns wide receiver with back-to-back 100-yard games since Josh Gordon back in 2013. What a run it has been for Amari Cooper over the past 5 days. And finally, David Njoku with a breakout game last night. 9 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown, Mike. And he's been playing a lot the first 2 weeks, and his route participation's been solid and all those things that we think matter. But they didn't materialize into fantasy points until last night.
Yeah, only 6 targets in the first 2 games, so I don't think you could trust him right now as a starter.
Did you hear what Jacoby Brissett said about him?
No.
Afterwards, he said that David Njoku is telling him every time in the huddle, "I'm open, I'm good, I got you." And he said, we use him so much for blocking.
Yeah.
It's so critical for that. He goes, but after he made the most of the opportunities last night, it might spark a little bit of increased interest in him getting the ball to David Njoku.
And he's available in about 2/3 of ESPN leagues, right? So he should be scooped up. He should at least be on your bench. And I mean, I'm sure some people put him in there for Dalton Schultz, and maybe he'll be a streaming option during bye weeks, and maybe he'll work his way into the tight end one conversation. But after weeks 1 and 2, and knowing that he is going to have blocking assignments in a run-heavy offense, I'm not so sure I'm going to rank him top 10 next week.
And moreover, this is a player that's flashed before, right? He's a rare athlete for the tight end spot. He's not quite Kyle Pitts, but he's in that same territory athletically. So you want to see it maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more weeks before you say, okay, lineup block, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but a nice showing from David Njoku. If we were playing like the football equivalent of horse, Stefan, your wide receivers only had to catch the ball in miraculous ways. George Pickens is the first pick in the
Oh my God,
draft,
it was
right?
unbelievable. I mean, I took that little clip. It was out there, and I froze the frame where he's literally horizontal.
It's absurd.
It's unbelievable.
How does he
It's
do
a
it? I don't know
circus
how he does
catch.
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible balance and strength and all the things that go with it. But it was at the end of the game, it looked like he was trying to do it again.
I know, he had an
If he
almost
just
touchdown
been in a better
catch, yeah.
position, he would have scored a touchdown
I
there.
think,
But
the
unbelievable.
coaching point is like, don't get too used to that stuff, right?
Right.
Like,
Well,
you
sure.
just because you can do it doesn't mean you need to do it,
But
right?
maybe you need to do it when your quarterback is putting the ball in places where that's what you have to do to make the play.
Yeah, no comment on that
That's-
matter. Yeah, no comment on that.
I think it's
Mike,
a function of the offense.
I mentioned the minus 2.4 for Najee Harris, so a
Yeah.
15.5 night, 15.5 fantasy points night goes down to 13.1. Haven't seen a ton of upside for he or Deontay Johnson, who Harris has found the end zone in 2 of 3 games. Deontay has not yet found the end zone. These are workman-like efforts, but is the ceiling tapped on these 2 players?
I don't think it's tapped on Harris because, first of all, he's been somewhat productive in fantasy to some extent, right? Even though the ceiling hasn't been there, but he's getting 16.7 touches per game. There's room to grow in efficiency. He's at 3.8 yards per carry or under 3.8 yards per carry in all 3 games.
Yeah.
Which you would hope would pick up as the season
I'm not
goes
sure.
on.
Didn't
But
you think it was a little better last night, though, versus week 1?
he looked a little better, but I mean,
The entire
offensive
offense
line's
looked a little
problematic.
better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is he's like the anti Nick Chubb, right? Where Chubb is like no passing game work and you're super reliant on the rushing and he's so efficient. Whereas Harris, you're looking at him and you're like mouth waters over the 70%, 80% snap shares and all the volume in the passing game, but it's just not happening because they have offensive line issues. So actually a lot of the overachieving running backs and breakout running backs like Miles Sanders and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you go on, it's like all O-lines we thought were great coming into the year, right? Seems to be correlated, right?
It's a game that is not exclusively won in the
coincidence.
trenches,
Yeah.
but certainly there's a lot of impact on those big guys up front.
And by the way, I mentioned that because opposite for Harris, right? We knew
Yeah.
coming in, they have big O-line problems.
They sure do. Yeah, they spent a lot of money. I'm not sure it's been fixed that much, at least in the running game. Pat Freiermuth was quiet for a long time. He had
That was
back-to-back
weird.
catches late in the game.
Back-to-back catches after nothing. in
Yeah,
the
so he ends up
beginning.
with 6.1 fantasy points. Weird utilization, 4 targets
yeah.
in total. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wish
he was
him
really
more.
good. Week 1 at the 10-target game. He's only had 11 targets since, but he had 10 and then 7, and then last week was kind of out of nowhere.
I didn't know if maybe George Pickens was like the squeaky wheel this week, right? Because he made the comment about how he was open 90% of the time in last week in week 2. Seemed more involved last night. I don't know if that was the reason why we saw less Pat Freiermuth. It might have also just been randomness because tight ends aren't always targeted that much.
Right. But he's been pretty high floor since October of last season.
Yep.
So I think he'll bounce back. I still feel confident in Pat Freiermuth.
And he's a really good. Those 2 catches he made, back-to-back plays, were like nice over-the-middle catches. Like he's a legit player. That much is for sure. Time now for us to get into our Week 3 preview. And this Week 3 preview is brought to you by Geico. Switch to Geico today and see all the ways you could save. We begin in Nashville, Tennessee, where the Titans, who are 0-2, host the Raiders, who are also 0-2. Here are the locks for your lineup. Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Derrick Henry. Even if Derrick Henry did have a quiet week 2, we're expecting a bounce-back effort. Same for Devontae Adams, by the way, who had just 2 catches last week. But there are a few interesting injuries here, Stefania, and I'm going to start with Hunter Renfrow, who, to my knowledge, has not been spotted this week yet.
No, hasn't practiced yet. Obviously, a concussion, left the game last week with a concussion. That's when he gave up the ball.
Yeah.
He was injured. So I think if you haven't seen him at all, definitely makes you concerned about his availability for this week.
And their wide receiver depth is razor thin. I mean, we're talking about Mac Hollins right now as the number 2 wide receiver, Mike, beyond Devontae Adams. But Josh Jacobs, Stefania, also a little banged up.
Well, he missed because of an illness. So
Okay.
it was just something something I wanted to put on people's radar that he was added on Thursday because of an illness. I would expect him to be back, but just watch for Friday status.
Traylon Burke, who's got an ankle injury here, Stefania. Not a fantasy starter by any stretch, but do we think he'll play on Sunday?
We do. He was back in full practice on Thursday, so just to know he's part of the equation.
Let's talk about these players in a little bit more here, Mike. Derek Carr has been not great so far through 2 games. Do you think this can be a breakthrough opportunity? Because the Titans have been pretty generous so far against the pass.
Yeah, they have, and he might have the occasional big game, but here's the problem. It's what we talked about all offseason with Derek Carr. Again,
Touchdown passes.
He's top 10 in attempts, yards, and touchdowns. Top 10, right? So he must be a QB1 in fantasy, right? No, he has no finishes better than 13th. I mean, it's 2 weeks, but he just can't get over the top because he's a 0 as a rusher. He just doesn't bring anything there. And unless he's throwing for, I mean, you saw Tua last week. Tua has 1 rushing yard this year, right?
1.
Yeah.
And he's QB3 or something because he had 460 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, I don't think you're going to get that often out of Carr, but that's what you need. You need 350 yards. You need Tom Brady-like stat lines to be a QB1. Carr has never gotten there in his career, and I don't think it's going to happen even this year.
To be clear, you mean Tom Brady in years that aren't this year? Because
In
Tom
years that
Brady
aren't
looks
this
like
year.
Derek.
Yes,
Tom
yes.
Brady looks like
Yes,
like
exactly.
2001 Tom Brady right now, which that's a deep cut for those that remember those old school Patriots days where it was like Antoine Smith running for like 120 yards and a touchdown and Brady throwing for like 152. Josh Jacobs, Mike, you know what the most surprising part is? That of the 34 running back carries so far this year, 29 of them gone to Josh Jacobs. He has been the man.
Yeah, exactly. He's getting all of the carry. It's kind of like Damian Harris, but like Josh McDaniels making the Patriots connections we've been doing all offseason. It's like if there was no Ramondre last year and it was just Damian Harris getting 99% of the carries and no targets.
Yeah.
Because that's the case. He has 2 targets this season. It's going to be problematic in fantasy. It's going to limit his ceiling. That was already a problem with him, though. He had a really high floor and a low ceiling last year, and it's going to be the same thing. You're just going to be hoping he finds the end zone on his 15 to 17 carries a game.
If Hunter Renfrow plays, would you be playing him this week, or is he not quite in that
Yeah.
lineup lock territory?
10 targets last week. That was above his average last year. 59 yards, I believe. That was above his season average last year. When he was a top 10 scoring fantasy receiver, I'm still optimistic about Hunter Renfrow. I know people are worried about him now, but if he keeps getting 9, 10, 11 targets, and they're still in the AFC West, right?
Yeah,
There's
they
going to be
are.
a lot of games where they're throwing the football. I'm still confident in Renfrow.
Again, worth noting, the Titans have had all kinds of injuries. They're
yeah,
signing
that
a cornerback off of a practice squad this week to try to build some reinforcements along that defensive backfield. The Bills go down to Miami for a game that we can't wait for. Both
Yes.
teams 2-0. Winner will emerge as first place of the AFC East. As far as the locks go, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Josh Allen, lineup lock. Stephon Diggs, lineup lock. Tyreek Hill, I actually have him higher than wide receiver 8. Jalen Waddle I think those 2 players might be a little bit off there, as I know that both Hill and Waddle are inside the top 10 this week. So if you're watching right now, it says Waddle and Hill are a little bit lower than that, but both lineup blocks this week inside the top 10. I mean, how could you not play them after what we've seen so far? But Stefania, there are a couple of key injuries on the Buffalo side. Gabe Davis, who did not play last week, do we think he'll give it a go on Sunday?
Well, it's interesting. He was out in practice on Thursday. Now, they did not practice Wednesday. They listed him as limited. These are all estimates. Teams do that for people who aren't familiar when they're not actually having a structured practice. Here's the thing. I saw a little video of Gabe Davis, and he's clearly not 100%. You know, you can just tell the ankle's still a thing. Whether that will limit him at all on Sunday, I don't know, but I would expect him to try and go.
Give it a go, but maybe not 100% there. Mike, understanding that, I think you still have to play Gabe Davis only because he might have 4 catches and 2 of them go in the end zone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think you can bench Gabe Davis right now unless you're in an 8-team league and stacked a receiver, right? He just has too much upside, right?
Yeah.
He could win you a week.
Dawson Knox popped up in the injury report too, Stefania.
Yeah, with a foot issue, limited on Thursday. Not really any indication that he could be in jeopardy of missing the game, but just a name to keep an eye on.
Played better. He had a quiet week 1, Mike. He was better in week 2. I'd say he's like fringe top 10 tight end.
Yeah, exactly. You're hoping for the touchdown. Haven't had the volume yet. We're not going to get. He's rarely going to be a 7-8 target guy. You're just hoping for the touchdown, and you'll get some in this offense, right?
The thing just to go back to Gabe Davis for a second, I would definitely start him as well. I just like to warn people when you know a guy's not 100%, those are the times where they may play, but they may not play as much as you're accustomed to, or they may play off the ball more than they do in a normal game when they're fully healthy. So you just have to understand the expectation going in.
And by the way, in week 1, he played almost every snap. It was
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs who played like 60%
Yeah.
of the snap. It didn't matter. Diggs is still Diggs. So we had like 25 fantasy points. But Gabe Davis, if you see him playing 2/3 of the snap on Sunday, that is a role reduction compared to where he was in week 1.
And by the way, remember we talked about this yesterday. Stephon Diggs probably going to draw the Xavier Howard shadow.
Yep.
Not too worried about that for Diggs, but that means a really good matchup on the other side for Gabe Davis against Keon Cross. And so potential big spot here for Gabe Davis if he's able to go in full.
All right, so Tua, unbelievable week last week, Mike.
Yeah.
Top three quarterback this week. Top 5. Is he a starter?
I don't think he's there yet, and there's
Same,
one
yeah.
reason: Sean McDermott, right? And that defense, it's just too good. I mean, the Bills' defense has allowed. I lost it. Where is it? I don't know. Oh, they held Stafford and Tannehill to 1 total touchdown. They have 5 interceptions. They've allowed 8.5 fantasy points so far to quarterbacks. Total, not average. Total. We know they're great. They were great last year. They've been great for 5 years. That's enough for me to not buy in just yet. But, you know, I want to play him if I have him after what I saw last week. How do you bench somebody that just had almost 500 yards and 6 touchdowns? It's tough. And I understand it if you do it, but this is it's an extremely hard matchup against this Bills defense.
Sure, and I will say this, that like no doubt the confidence that Tua probably gained last week can translate into further fantasy success. But if we had the conversation about whether Tua was a fantasy starter 7 quarters into this NFL regular season, it wouldn't be a conversation.
True.
Right? As you said, was that before the show or during the show that he mentioned he had 1 rushing yard through 2 games?
Yeah,
He
in
has
the show.
1.
Yeah.
So you need elite passing production, and he had 270 passing yards and 1 touchdown in week 1. That's not exactly screaming QB1 upside, right? And then week 2 through 3 quarters, again, better. And that 4th quarter exists. I'm not trying to say it doesn't, but I think maybe a little more of a sample size of Tua playing great, which by the way could happen. And we'd feel more emboldened in our stance. Like, this guy is a lineup lock. He has taken over the likes of Joe Burrow and Russell Wilson as those fringe top 10 quarterbacks in this season.
If he has a good game, like a QB1 game against the Bills,
then it's on,
we're having
baby.
a different
Yeah,
story
right.
going forward.
Yep.
But by the way, is that a Dolphin shirt?
This is from the PLL. Shout out the PLL. Shout out the Water Dogs for a big championship for you guys. The Dogs earned it. They got some dog in them. Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds. I think if I could, I'd bench them both, Mike. I mean, I shouldn't say bench them both, but I think maybe I'd like to fade them if I could.
Yeah, one of the bigger fantasy surprises last week, especially after Chase Edmonds was very busy in week 1, was that he ran behind Raheem Mostert. He was getting crushed in the snap department in the first half, and that changed in the second half. He started playing more, but he still ended up 12 behind. He has a slight edge on Mostert in pretty much every category, but he only has 7 targets too. Like, it's just not enough of an edge. He has no top 30 fantasy week. So I agree. Bench-worthy players, don't want him in my lineup. If I had to pick a flex, like saying a 12-teamer, I'm leaning toward Edmonds.
Mike Gesicki, tweet of the week last week. Well done by you after that gritty that, well, kind of reminded me of my own gritty. I'm not going to lie to you. But I think that Mike Gesicki he had a good game last week, but still, if you look at the utilization compared to where he was last year, he is very much a role player this season compared to where he was last year. Probably needs a touchdown to pay off. And in a really tough matchup, I would be fading Mike Gesicki. Let's go to the Ravens and the Patriots. Of course, locks, pretty simple in this one for the Baltimore Ravens. You have Lamar Jackson and you have Mark Andrews. Stefan can assure you that Lamar Jackson's Wednesday limited injury report status was a thing that we are not too concerned about, right?
No, he got banged up in the game. Somebody hit his elbow, so he had a sleeve on. Of course, everybody, alarm bells everywhere, which is understandable because Lamar Jackson he finally missed his first games last year, so now we're concerned, but he's fine. Fully practicing on Thursday, throwing, he's good.
And speaking of fully practicing, J.K. Dobbins continues to fully practice.
Right. And we talked about this last week. And we talked about it earlier this week when John Harbaugh said he was calling him week to week. And I think that caught everyone's attention that he used that terminology. I don't know that the status of J.K. Dobbins has really changed much. I think it's just a way of framing it. Harbaugh, to complete that quote, said, so that is what it is. When he's ready, he'll be out there, which is about as vanilla of a quote as you're going to get.
I was going to say, I absolutely have no idea what he means by that. So,
But we also have
Thank
said
you.
all along, right, that the first week he plays, none of us are expecting him to be J.K. Dobbins 100% of snaps, 100%. I think consider it the final phase of rehab when he goes back out on the field and you don't know what you're going to get.
I will say this, I totally agree with that. He's going to be hard to play if he's active this week, but they don't have an answer in that backfield right now. There's an opportunity once he's up to speed to play a huge role, maybe 65% of the snaps. And if they try to get him involved at least somewhat in the passing game,
Sure.
I mean, there's big fantasy upside here.
Yeah,
I really
and
believe that.
Maybe not this week only because of A, if he does play, it might be a limited role. And B, I think through the first 2 games, Patriots have been one of the better run defenses, right? Just thinking about it, like the Dolphins got little going, and then Najee didn't have a big day last week either. For the Ravens, Mike, Rashad Bateman has been really good, multiple 50-yard touchdown catches this year. That seems good, right? But the target share, or the total targets and the total snap percentage this year, not quite elite. Do you think that the Ravens, I mean, I would think / hope they'd play him more every single week, but does that hold you back a little bit as far as his fantasy value is concerned?
It does. And again, this is the concern we had in the offseason. Would the volume be there? Because the volume hasn't been there in the past for even Marquise Brown at times, right? So 12 targets and 63% of the snaps, to put some numbers on it. That's not enough, right? Six targets a game is not going to cut it based on his fantasy output so far this season. So we need a little bit of a boost there. If not, he's just going to settle in as kind of a boom bust wide receiver 3. Worst case, maybe a flex. But again, that's about where you drafted him. So he's kind of he's exceeding expectations so far, but the volume is a red flag, much like Clyde Edwards-Helaire we've talked about, right? The volume is a concern. Same kind of thing with Rashad Bateman. So for now, I think you're starting him because he looks like the real deal.
Yeah.
And there's just enough for that wide receiver 3 consideration, but I'm worried about the ceiling.
Probably should have asked you about Jacoby Myers during the injury section, Stefania, who I believe has not yet practiced this week.
He has not. It did do some warm-ups. He's been playing through this injury since the final preseason game when he banged his knee up, so I would expect that he's probably going to try and go, but today is a big day for the Jacoby Myers status.
If he doesn't play and you're playing DFS out there, maybe Kendrick Bourne shows some life on Sunday.
Maybe
if there's no Jacoby Myers, right?
Yeah, I
think
think
if there is none.
Yeah, for sure. Nelson Aguilar is priced similarly. He's a guy you could sub into in DFS. They're pretty close. But Myers, I want to put some numbers out there because it's kind of incredible. We've talked about a little bit of this. 8+ targets in 6 of his past 7 full games. 4+ catches in 21 of his last 22 games, which is incredible. And the Ravens defense, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both had 40+ points, but 4 Jets in week 1 at 9 or more points. 4 Jets, 4 different Jets receivers. Think about that for a second. So 9's not a huge number, but the fact that 4 got there is incredible. Myers has been heavily targeted. If he goes, I'm starting him.
How about the Patriots running backs, Mike? Any lean there? Do we think that one of them has to be started or no? Yeah.
No, I have Harris at 24. He had a 15-9 carry edge last week, only the 2 targets, but he actually got outsnapped by Stevenson. But his touchdown upside makes me a little bit more optimistic as a flex or in 12-team leagues, maybe an RB2, but neither are must starts.
I feel the same way, especially because we thought Ramondre or somebody could have taken on that passing game role.
Come on.
The answer is, they're just saying whoever's out there is going to catch passes, and neither one of them is catching many. Let's go to the Saints and the Panthers, NFC South rivalry. The Panthers looking to avoid 10 straight losses. Stefania, Christian McCaffrey had a great quote yesterday. Did you see it?
Oh, I heard it.
Christian McCaffrey said after practice, I could go take a leak during the middle of practice and I'd probably pop up on the injury report.
I'm glad you said it because I was like, the quote needed to be included. Wasn't sure I wanted to deliver it.
Yeah.
But honestly, look, I have to admire it. He kind of said it with a chuckle because he popped up on the injury report. And here's why everybody gets nervous. They see that he's off on Wednesday and then he's limited on Thursday and it lists his ankle. We know ankle injuries were part of his situation both last year and the year before. But understand the context of it. Wednesday is a veteran rest day now for Christian McCaffrey. And you know what? I applaud the Panthers because this is something new for him this year. He had ankle stiffness coming out of last week's game. And rather than bring him back into a full workload, they eased him in. Thursday is their heaviest day of practice. So they gave him a lighter workload on Thursday after being off on Wednesday. And I actually think that's an evolution for the Panthers.
Oh, yeah, well done.
Because they are structuring his practice week accordingly. Not a big deal for him. I'm not even a little bit worried about it.
I just traded for him in Dynasty so I could start him.
There you go. You can start him. Let's get back to lineup blocks. I wanted to make sure that we mentioned the McCaffrey injury because here's the reality. Even if it's not a big deal, when you're the face of fantasy football like he was for multiple years,
and you've missed multiple
and
games
you're limited,
the last 2 years,
then we're going to talk about it. So back to our lineup blocks. Christian McCaffrey is a lineup block. His teammate DJ Moore, I think, is probably more of a lineup block in our eyes. We've got him at wide receiver 24 in terms of ESPN consensus rank. There are some people that I think are fairly concerned about him, but Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas also lineup blocks for the Saints. Michael Thomas has been great through 2 games, catching a touchdown in each. Stefania, Alvin Kamara, we say he's a lineup block. contingent upon him playing.
Right. He didn't play last week because the rib injury has been limited in practice so far this week. Friday, again, we always say this is a very telling day in terms of the activity, but so far, from my understanding, it does look like Alvin Kamara will be good to go. And I know he's not on our injury list, but I just want to note that Jameis Winston had ankle added to his, remember, he was playing through fractures in his back, which
painful.
for the people who are wondering, like, how could you do that? It's a part of the vertebrae that's not considered structural or load bearing. So you can do it, but it's a lot of pain. But he's also now dealing with an ankle issue. And so mobility for Jameis is going to be a problem. And how does that impact how the game plays out? It'd be interesting to see. He's going to need to get rid of the ball quickly.
Mike, give me some optimism surrounding DJ Moore. He found the end zone last week. That's good. But there are people that I said they are fairly, and I say fairly as in like justifiably concerned about the fact that he has exactly 3 catches for 43 yards in the first 2 games.
Well, he won't be shadowed full time by Marshawn Lattimore.
Okay, so
How
there's
about
a reason
that
for
optimism?
optimism.
It
Yeah.
won't be every play. Actually, I don't. Lattimore's never shadowed him, but they line up on the same field, the same side of the field about 65% of the time. So he will be on him quite a bit in this game. That makes me a little nervous. The optimism is he still has a 23% target share, right? It's down from last year from 28%. You don't like that, but it's still 23. It's not awful, and there's room for a step forward here. So I'm still carrying on. I'm still starting Moore for now.
Well, hey, the Panthers better get their act together now. Again, 10 straight losses. Things don't just stay the same if you lose 10 straight games in the NFL. So we'll see whether they can gut check their way to a win in week 3. We're going to continue and talk about Justin Herbert, talk about a major injury of note in just a minute. But we're going to start with Mike telling us about Geico.
Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save money on insurance?
I would love it.
Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV, even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Global X ETFs. With rising oil and gas prices, alternative vehicle technologies are looking more attractive. Is your portfolio keeping up? At Global X ETFs, we offer a lineup that can provide exposure to innovative companies at the forefronts of this and other emerging trends. Visit globalxetfs.com to learn how you can invest in these disruptions without putting all of your hopes in a single draft pick. We're back now. We're talking about the Jaguars and the Chargers. Lineup locks for this game. Let's start with Christian Kirk. Shout out to you, Christian Kirk, who's been awesome through 2 games so far. Money well spent by the Jags. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert, and Mike Williams. Again, we told you this last week, and there were some people that said, you guys, Mike Williams, set it and forget it, live with the sword, live by the sword, die by the sword, you mouth-breathing losers. Well, how'd it feel on Thursday night when he was on your bench and you scored your 25-plus fantasy points? It is what it is, right? You have Mike Williams, you play him, you live with the good days and the bad days. You hope that the good days dramatically outweigh the bad days. But the injuries are notable here, Stefania. Perhaps the most notable injury of the week in the NFL is Justin Herbert, who looked like he had a shattered rib cage at the end of last week's game.
It was scary, right? Because it looked like he was having trouble breathing, and that you would expect, but so much pain. And yet he comes out and delivers a strike that ends up being just amazing for them. Now, listen, if you had a rib fracture, the worry about a fractured rib is, could you end up puncturing your own lung with a rib fracture? When you fracture the cartilage or crack the cartilage, that's no longer a worry. So then when people are talking about, well, they say he can play because it's going to be safe for him, there's not really the worry of it becoming a more progressive injury, and it comes down to pain tolerance. That part is true. Yeah. But this is not just mild pain tolerance. If you've ever had a rib injury, everything about it hurts. It hurts to take a breath. It hurts to twist. It hurts to throw. Even though it was on his left-hand side, he throws right. Every movement is going to affect it. And by the way, the pain from this will probably last between 6 and 8 weeks because it takes a very long time to heal. So how do you manage it? Well, you are tough, which Justin Herbert is, but then you wear a rib protector, which he will do. And then you can opt for a pregame injection. And this is where it gets tricky because we know that with the Tyrod Taylor situation, he suffered a lung puncture as a result of getting a pain-numbing injection. I don't know what's going to happen with Justin Herbert, but he's either going to opt for an injection or he's going to try and tough it out. But everything right now points to him trying to go because he was throwing yesterday. It's remarkable when you consider the level of pain he's probably in, that he's doing as much as he is. But it could be a really long day for him. even with a pain numbing injection, which helps a great deal, it could be tough. But I think this is a hard one to evaluate because no matter what, he's going to be dealing with a lot of pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's a daunting thought. I don't know if it's the same doctor who was the one that administered the Tyrod Taylor injection.
Fair question.
But if you are sitting there, your career, but think about it, your career was hatched because of an injection gone wrong.
Right.
You really want to stare down that? I mean, I understand it's probably 1 in 1,000 that it happens.
It's very rare.
But you've already seen it once, and lightning can strike twice, Mike. By the way, just a quick note. If you're watching the graphics right now, you might be seeing some rankings. When I say a lineup block, and if it looks like a guy based off of this ranking as lineup block, it's our bad. We'll keep trying to get these rankings set up on the screen here. But if you're watching, you saw Christian Kirk at wide receiver 36. He's much higher than that. I can promise you, for those that are watching him or watching our show right now. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of these Jaguars players here, Mike, specifically the 2 running backs, because it does seem like James Robinson has taken this backfield by storm.
Yeah, he's the clear lead back, right? And this was kind of the fear based on what Doug Peterson was saying on the offseason. It's kind of been realized. And ATN looks so good, it seemed almost impossible this would be the situation, but here we are. Robinson has played 73 snaps to 55 for ETN. He has 55 carries. ETN is 13. And you might think, well, ETN, just give him a bunch of targets. He'll be fine. He has 7 in 2 games. It's not enough. He hasn't gotten to 9 fantasy points yet. I do think he'll be better as the season goes on. And maybe this week, you know, if they're trailing the Chargers, he should play a larger role. You would expect that. But they trust Robinson. He's going to be the primary ball carrier. Should be in there at the goal line. Even some involvement in the passing game. It's a concern for ETN's upside for sure. And enough that I don't think he's close to a lineup block right now. And frankly, I'd bench him if I could.
I forgot to ask Stefania about Keenan Allen. I was still sort of reeling from the Justin Herbert situation, but do we think Keenan will give it a go? He's been out for now a game and a half.
Yeah, and I think he's going to try, limited work both days. I think if he ratchets it up today in practice, there's a good chance that he goes. It's usually this 1 to 3 game window for somebody with a mild hamstring injury. We heard that they didn't think it was serious, but obviously they wanted to give him a rest for a week, so we'll see.
Okay. Well, if he does play, obviously you play him. Mike, if he doesn't play, I kind of think that makes Gerald Everett more interesting.
Yes, definitely. He's the number 4 scoring tight end, right? And
It's
Allen's
been
been out for about a game and a half. He's just been productive. 35 routes last week, 10 targets, 71 yards. A lot of short range stuff, but in PPR, we don't care. We'll take that all day long, and it's been enough for top 5 production. So Everett, yes, and also Josh Palmer becomes more
viable,
startable or viable as a flex. He was very disappointing last week until the late garbage time touchdown, but we got it, and he's been productive when he has played a lot of snaps over his year and a half in the NFL.
Be about wide. I feel like I end up saying the same range of wide receivers often when I'm describing players, but like wide receiver 30-ish, right? Like a potentially usable flex if there is no Keenan Allen on Sunday. Let's get to the Rams and the Cardinals. This game is being played in Arizona, and we're really, really, really reaching here for a lineup lock. Cooper Kupp, who is just absurd. I mean, he is patently absurd right now. He has back-to-back games of up over 31 fantasy points. Kyler Murray also a lineup block. James Conner also a lineup block for the Arizona Cardinals. And one more time, Stefania, assuming he plays on Sunday.
Yeah, James Conner had an ankle issue, but he was there on the sideline. They indicated they didn't think it was serious. He's back practicing. I expect him to be able to go. Our other injury concern is, of course, Rondale Moore, who I don't think goes this week.
Yeah, it's been a tough go of it for Rondale Moore. He got hurt before week 1, right? So we still haven't seen him on the field. He was supposed to be a big part of their offense this year. This could be 3 straight games without him. Mike, it hasn't been great so far for Matthew Stafford. Not terrible, but not great either. Would you start him this week?
Yeah, 5 interceptions, too, which is a concern.
He led the NFL in interceptions last year, though.
You don't like those -2s, but what you do like is the matchup here. The Cardinals have allowed the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, 7 touchdowns allowed. That's also most in the NFL. So matchup is promising. He was better last week. Obviously, the disaster against the Bills bounced back a little last week and now has a pretty good matchup. So I do view him as a streaming option. He's 7th on my board. Yeah. So I do think you start him this week.
How about the running backs? Because it feels like, I know that Cam Akers was left for dead. I'm just telling you, I still think there are stranger things that could happen during this fantasy season than Cam Akers working his way back into the starting running back role for the Rams.
Yeah, we get Jake Funk week now. Like it's Henderson, then Akers. Who we getting this week, right? Yeah. Who knows? They're going to bring back Todd Gurley or something for some snaps. Look, Akers had 15 carries and 3 targets last week. If we got that in week 1 and 2, we'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like he'll deliver RB2 numbers all season with that sort of workload. But Darrell Henderson played a lot more snaps in the second half and that ran 10 more routes than him. And the production wasn't there. We still have offensive line concerns. So
Major offensive line.
yeah, and again, just he's been outsnapped in both games. One game significantly by Henderson. So I like that we got 15 carries out of him. And if this offense plays better, maybe he does get back into that conversation. But I don't feel great about him right now. He's 34th on my board. Henderson is 35th. Neither guy is a lineup lock.
Who leads all tight ends in targets right now?
Tyler Higbee.
Wow, way to bury the lead there, Mike. Or way to bury the joke. Yeah, like you could have guessed, like you could have humored me. Like it's got to be Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, right?
I want to show my football intelligence and my knowledge.
Yeah,
Your
Mike,
football-
so smart.
Your football IQ.
As
Mike
I
Klein
sit
has
here trying to
infinite
think of
wisdom.
words. Like I couldn't even spit it out. I couldn't even say what the words I was trying to say.
20 so far, Mike.
I are smart.
Yeah.
I are smart.
Should Tyler Higbee be in your
It's the
lineup
end
every
of a
week
long
then?
week. It's okay.
It has been, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Thursday night football, no one
Football
slept last
starts to
night.
crush
Yeah.
us, you know?
Yeah.
As early as week
We're all on
3.
fumes and it's
Yeah.
week 3. But yes, I think you have to start him. He's never finished higher than 14th, which is a concern.
So
but
you're saying he's going to drop.
I think he probably will. But this is going back to late last season when he was healthy at the end of the regular season. It's like 5, 6 straight games with 8+ targets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a thing that's
It
happening.
reminds me of Pat Freiermuth. Like, I don't think he's going to have 100 yards in a lot of games, but he might have a touchdown and 5 catches in 5 games this year.
Yeah, and at least this week, process-wise, you're like, if you start Higbee and he has a dud, he leads the NFL. He leads all tight ends in targets. Like
Right.
process-wise,
It's not your
it's a
fault.
good decision to put him in your lineup.
Hollywood Brown, he has been okay so far this year, Mike, running a ton of go routes so far, but also getting some near the line work. What do you make of him after 2 weeks so far?
Yeah, tracing back to his Ravens days, 6+ targets in 12 consecutive games, had 11 last week. He's doing about what we expected. You know, I think that the offense has been a little underachieving relative to what we hoped from Kyler Murray in this team, but he's putting together solid stat lines, 12.8 plus fantasy points in both games. He'll see a little Jalen Ramsey in this game, but I don't expect a full shadow. So Marquise Brown, you got him, you start him.
Yeah. By the way, Zach Ertz probably close to a lineup block. We've got him as tight end 10 on the board. He's got an end zone target in both games. He's scored. He's been a good player for them. He's just been he's at the tail end of his career. It's not the same athletically, and he was hurt coming into the season.
Yeah, exactly. And that was his only kind of down game over the past. Let's see, he has 9+ targets in 5 of his past 6 games with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Right. So once he got up to speed, he's been a favorite target of Kyler Murray. I agree. I have him 10th. That doesn't necessarily say absolute lineup block, but if I
Close
have him,
to
I
it,
want to
yeah.
start him. Yeah.
I think there's some good consistency there, though. Like Kyler Murray's going to look for him.
if you're looking for a daily fantasy play, Greg Dortch, again, he has been extremely heavily targeted through 2 games. Shout out to Dan Graziano, who mentioned him before week 1 on Fantasy Football Now. Falcons and Seahawks, and we have our lineup blocks. Oh, wait, hold on. Wait, we got to run the graphic, guys, on lineup. Oh, we
there it
have-
is. It's
There's
just
none.
a
Yeah,
blank
we
screen.
don't have one.
They must
so-
be broken.
Oh, there are no
There's
lineup blocks.
No lineup
That's
block.
right. There are no lineup blocks here between the Falcons and the Seahawks.
Can
Things
you
that
imagine that we have a Falcons game and we cannot say Kyle Pitts is the
don't get me
lineup
started
block?
on it. Don't get me started on it. And there's also no injuries of note here, Stefani, right? No
I know.
major
Well, when
injuries.
no one plays.
All right, so on to the next game. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Let's just talk through a couple of these here, and let's begin where we have to. Kyle Pitts. We'll say it once. We'll say it a million times. It's been so disappointing this year. Like I keep using this word, unfathomable how he has played through 2 games so far, and yet I know we didn't mention him as a lineup block, but we all have him ranked inside our top 10. Mike, I'm assuming if you have Kyle Pitts, you're playing him.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, I want to play him. I have him on some teams. I want to start him. It doesn't, like, all the warning signs are there. Like when I was driving here, I came to a red light and stopped like a normal person, but the guy next to me was like, I don't care. I'm just going right through this red light. Like there was a red light right there. It said warning. Like that's what that means, right? You're about to get T-boned.
Okay.
It wasn't yellow. Like
It was
all
red.
the warning signs, red. That's like,
It's not funny. Why am I
like
laughing?
2 catches,
Like, that's
19
very
yards, back-to-back games,
Yes.
right in front of him. He went right. That's what I want to do, though. I mean, I want to be like that guy and just start Kyle Pitts, despite all the warning signs that say you're about to get crashed.
I think
it's
here's
going to be
I think
bad.
what we should
Disaster's
do here.
coming.
What we should do. Here's what we should do. Jackson does an amazing job with our social stuff here at the Fantasy Focus. Has an awesome TikTok. Go follow it. It's on Fantasy Focus. Go find it on TikTok. It's got a bunch of followers now. He should make a TikTok and post it on Saturday of just Kyle Pitts' combine workout. Because if the warning sign is 2 catches for 19 yards in back-to-back weeks, the green light is the combine workout.
Right.
He should post that. Do they even have a combine
Maybe
the year
he
that
should,
Kyle
like,
Pitts
clip
got
it and send
drafted?
it to Arthur Smith.
Yeah, he should do that too, right? Yeah. Because that's what I'm going to watch on Saturday because I have no life. Also, because I really want Kyle Pitts to score a bunch of points.
We're just
on
going to manifest
Sunday.
it.
Yeah,
Or you
I'm
can watch
telling-
you can watch last season's highlights when he had 1,000 yards as a 20-year-old, right?
Right.
But I mean, Arthur Smith's comments don't really get me excited that a big turnaround's coming. You know, if you can get Parker Hesse bubble screens, man, that's how you win. Apparently, I don't know.
Drake London, fairly close to a lineup lock though, Mike. He's 25th on your wide receiver board. I've got him at 27.
2 good games, great matchup, 33% target share. 1 of every 3 passes. Like, why can't we do that for Kyle Pitts? Throw a third to London, a third to Kyle Pitts, and maybe a third to Patterson, and you're done. Go home. You're going to win some games that way.
So, I'm with you. The good news is if you're playing a Seahawks running back, the good news is game script should be okay, right? They shouldn't be down by 25 points, so they should be able to run Rashad Penny and Ken Walker enough. The problem is that they're both running. The problem is that this offense has not been great through 2 games, and I think more than them, it dramatically impacts his wide receivers. DK Metcalf, not a lineup block, Mike. That's 35 yards or fewer in back-to-back games. Where are you, DK? It's not your fault.
Yeah, it's not really his fault. The 13 targets under 40 yards in both games. The first game he was shadowed. It was short area targets. Last week he just wasn't targeted. It was a Tyler Lockett game. So
he did have one big play that was called back due to penalty, but still, I mean, those,
But when you get this 2 weeks in a row and you have suspect quarterback play, and honestly, Geno Smith's probably overachieved, and still we're not getting the production and the big play. So it's a concern for me with both of these guys. I have him 26th. I have Lockett 32nd, not lineup blocks, but Metcalf, it's like the Kyle Pitts thing, right? He's just insanely good athlete and great player, and you want to start him.
The biggest fear I have for Kyle Pitts is that we went through this all year last year with DK, right? Like I was saying, like at the beginning of the last season, like if I were the person, like if I were the quarterback, I would just run a play called pass the ball to DK. You hear these NFL plays, it's like, blue right shift to Y on, like, waggle on 2-on-2. I'm like, my play would be like pass to DK. That would be mine, right?
You just do anything. I'll charge you.
Yeah. So, DK, not lineup block though, unfortunately.
By the way, running backs, it's not a 2-man backfield, it's a 3-man backfield. Travis Homer played 20 snaps. He's their passing down back. That was something we did mention in the offseason as a possibility. It's a problem right now. 6 carries and no targets for Penny. Not going to cut it in fantasy. Can't start him right now.
This is just completely absurd to me, the next game that we're going to discuss right now. So,
this has got the over-under for this got to be 60, right?
62. Packers and Buccaneers. Let's take a look at the lineup locks and factoring in which players are available right now, healthy and available to play. Lineup locks for Packers and Buccaneers. Those include Aaron Jones and Leonard Fournette. That is it.
Wait, where's Mike Evans?
He's suspended.
Where's Chris Godwin?
He's
where's Julio Jones?
Where's
Gronk? Where's Brady? Where's Rodgers?
That's right. So, Stefania.
Yeah.
As far as let's just go through the wide receiver injuries on both sides of the ball. And again, Mike Evans suspended officially, cannot play on Sunday. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Chris Godwin and Julio Jones specifically. Where are we at there?
So they're not practicing.
Still haven't.
Still not practicing Wednesday or Thursday. Julio Jones had that knee contusion from week 1, and we thought there was they were going to warm him up before week 2, so you thought you might get Julio Jones back, but apparently it's a little more problematic than what they originally thought because he's still not practicing. You've got Chris Godwin, which to me isn't as much of a surprise because we thought, look, even though the hamstring injury wasn't serious, given the significant knee injuries coming off of, that they would be cautious with him. So that one doesn't totally surprise me. But you've also got Russell Gage dealing with a hamstring, Rashad Perriman dealing with a knee issue. So all the receivers are banged up.
And let's go to the Packers side of this.
Oh, yeah.
Also all banged up.
That's why I need a list. I can't keep them on my head. Yeah, Sammy Watkins dealing with a hamstring issue, limited in practice. Christian Watson, not that he's been much of a factor at all, but a hamstring issue. Alan Lazard still on the injury report because of his ankle, although he did make a big play in the last game, and I do expect Alan Lazard to be available. And then Randall Cobb, who, hello Randall Cobb, but now on the injury report because of illness.
No one fact-checked this. But I am just telling you, I have heard from a couple of sources that when the game begins on Sunday, there is a chance that the number 1 Packers wide receiver will be Jordy Nelson and the number 1 Bucs wide receiver will be Keyshawn Johnson. Again, no one fact-checked that. I'm just telling you that if it happens on Sunday afternoon at 4:25 in Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, Florida, you heard it here first.
Yeah, you called it.
Quarterbacks have been around long
Are
enough
you
to
kidding
play
me?
with them.
Are you kidding me with all those wide receiver injuries? So this leads us to the quarterback conversation here, Mike. We have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback 15 and Tom Brady. I'm at quarterback 12. I might be too high on both of these guys.
Oh, and I forgot Scotty Miller with a calf.
Oh,
yeah, they're
good
all
measure, right?
They're all questionable. They're out or questionable. All of them.
All right, so I mean, reasonably, like if you have either of those quarterbacks in your roster, you're looking for a different option, aren't you?
I think you are. I do have Brady at 10, so he's more borderline. But
can I ask you why? And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but why?
Because he's Tom Brady. That's really it.
2 weeks in, though,
you just
right?
think that and it's a competitive game against the Packers. You think he might throw 45 passes in this game, and the receiver situation might not be good, but it's Tom Brady, and if he gets rolling, he could throw for 299 and 3 touchdowns if this game gets rolling. I mean, it's a possibility. It's at least in the range of outcomes because it's Tom Brady.
Right, and I agree with that. It is Tom Brady, and he could do anything, right? He could throw to me and you and Stefania. Well, Stefania would be a wide receiver one, but he could throw to you and I and have 250 with 2 touchdowns. But as we often tell people, like what our job is to do is to try to evaluate realistic possibilities and assign a probability to them. And it feels like the probability of Tom Brady having a massive game with all these injuries, not just to these wide receivers, but to his offensive line. And in an offense that all of a sudden is running the football more seems lower than somebody else who, and I hate to keep banging the same drum over and over again, but as an example, maybe it's a Carson Wentz. Maybe it's a Kirk Cousins. Maybe it's even a Jared Goff if you're feeling super frisky this weekend, who could have 275 yards and 2 touchdown passes.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree. I couldn't fault anyone for going that direction, but if you're talking about the guys in the same range, like Tua, he's playing Buffalo, right? Carson Wentz is playing Philly. You know, like they're a tough matchup as well, and those guys have really been beating up on defenses that have that aren't very good, right? So it's a much tougher situation, and those guys are all kind of in the same vicinity. Essentially, you know, we talk about tiers in the offseason. It applies in season as well. They're very close. So I understand if you're nervous and you don't want to go that direction, and the same applies to Rodgers, right? I'm lower on him at 15th. I mean, the Bucs have allowed less than 15 fantasy points total so far in 2 games, and that's a half game of Dak. That's Jameis Winston, half game of Cooper Rush. 15. I mean, that defense is really good. They're carrying that team so far.
I think one of the things that people also need to consider when it comes to the type of injuries the receivers have is so much of it is hamstring injuries. So you need your receivers to get separation. The quarterbacks both of them are getting harassed because of the offensive line situation. They want to be able to get the ball out to the receiver. If they're tightly covered because they can't play the way they normally play, even if they're out on the field, they're not going to be as effective at doing what they need to do to help support their quarterback who needs to get the ball off quickly.
Let's imagine for now that Julio and Chris Godwin are out. Is there a single Bucs wide receiver that you're starting, Mike?
Russell Gage would just on volume alone get to the flex conversation. Maybe Brashad Perriman in DFS.
Okay.
But that's it.
Okay. Same thing for the Packers. Let's assume Alan Lazard plays. Is he startable against that secondary?
So check this out. Week 1, no Packers receiver was over 5 targets. Last week, Lazard's back, so someone will be, right? No one was over 4 targets in that game. So it's receiver by committee. Lazard scored, but he only had 3 targets in the game. I mean, I would think about him just because I think that number will go up. Remember, game script for them was positive in the second half. They didn't have to throw the ball. He's the only one that I would consider for flex, but as you can see, if you're watching, we all have them unranked.
I know that NFTs are probably not quite as popular as they were about a year or so ago, but if somebody wants to make an NFT of this conversation, we're talking about Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers on the bench in fantasy football. Capture this moment in time. Throw that one into a bottle because I can't imagine we'll have many more conversations like that.
And 2 weeks from now, we might be like, all right, Rodgers 7th, Brady 5th every week again.
Yeah, right.
Like
maybe. I don't know. Not against each other, though. Not against their own defense is what I would say, right? Like maybe when Rodgers plays the Lions.
A few weeks from now.
Yeah, fair.
I'm saying a few weeks from now, they could have a couple good games. Guys get a little healthier. Like we expect Godwin back soon. Evans will be back next week. There's a chance here, right? I don't think that you just have to drop these guys and it's over. There's reason for optimism within a few weeks that they're better.
I need some positivity. So let's talk about Patrick Mahomes in a second. But first, the most wonderful time of the year is upon us again. It's college football season, and Dr. Pepper and residents of Fansville invite you to revel in another one-of-a-kind year, flexing your foam finger, humming your school's fight song in your sleep, and thriving on a steady diet of buffalo chicken dip and post-game day commentary, all washed down with a rich, delicious Dr. Pepper, of course. Another Saturday is always just around the corner, so make sure your tailgate doesn't turn into a failgate and pick up a case of ice-cold Dr. Pepper, the one fans deserve.
Hiring is challenging, especially right now when you have so much on your plate. Luckily, there's one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. A place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates. That place is ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter does the work for you. ZipRecruiter uses its powerful technology to find and match the right candidates up with your job. You can easily review these recommended candidates and invite your top choices to apply. No wonder ZipRecruiter is the #1 rated hiring site based on G2 satisfaction ratings as of January 1st, 2022. And right now, to try ZipRecruiter for free, our listeners can go to ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. That's ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter.com/FFF. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
We are back. Let's talk Colts and Chiefs, and let's get to lineup locks. And in this game, of course, Patrick Mahomes, a lineup lock, Travis Kelce, a lineup lock, and even after last week's down week, Jonathan Taylor, very much a lineup lock. Let's get to the injuries here, Stefania. And there's a player that would be a lineup lock if he were healthy. That's Michael Pittman Jr., missed last week with a quad injury. Think he'll play?
Yes, I do.
So
I
do
think
I,
Michael
yeah.
Pittman and Alec Pierce will both be back. Obviously, I was hoping Alec Pierce would be available and get a little bump when Michael Pittman was out, so I don't know how much he'll factor in, but both look to be available this week.
Okay, that's good news there, Mike. Michael Pittman was awesome in week one, that quad injury, and Shefty suggested yesterday he was pretty close to returning. As far as the Colts go, really nobody else besides Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, unfortunately.
No, people are going to think about Ashton Dolan, but with both of those receivers back, not to mention Paris Campbell still playing a ton of snaps, I don't think you can consider Dolan this week.
Let's talk about the Chiefs then, Mike. You do opportunity for fantasy points, you do OTDs, you do all these various metrics that basically say what a player should score versus what they do score. It feels like Clyde Edwards-Helaire was one of the early overachievers in fantasy.
Yeah, I put my money where my mouth is and traded him away in one of my longest running dynasty leagues this week. Kind of took advantage. It was him and Mike Evans for CMC.
Oh, it's an interesting trade right there.
Little piece in there, yeah.
Wow, interesting piece right there.
16 team, loaded at receiver, decided to get that running back. I'm just worried CH is just going to crash back to earth because he can't keep doing what he's doing with the volume he has right now. He had 12 touches in week one, or 10 touches in week one, 12 touches in week two. Not going to cut it. He was outsnapped by Jerick McKinnon last week. Yeah. And all it's going to take this week against the Colts is the same snap distribution we've seen this season.
And no touchdown.
Except for CH doesn't score and McKinnon has a big play, like a 52-yard touchdown catch.
Right.
Then the narrative completely changes on CH. He drops from 5th in fantasy points at running back to 12th and continues the downward spiral, and his value plummets. So I don't think he's going to keep up as an RB1 unless that volume goes up. And there's really no reason to think it will. There really isn't because they like Jerick McKinnon and he's playing a lot.
He is a strong flex play is what I would consider. Maybe a low-end RB2. He might have more utilization. He might have a couple more RB2 or even RB1 weeks in him, but I do believe based off of utilization and skill set, he is a strong flex player, a low-end RB2 much more than a high-end RB1. The Chiefs have really good receivers, pass catchers. I'm not sure any of them can be played, though, because you just don't know who's going to be, right? Patrick Mahomes called the shot before the season. Patrick Mahomes was like, hey, 1 week it's going to be this guy, next week it's going to be the other guy, then another guy, then another guy, another guy. You don't know who it's going to be week to week. And through 2 weeks, Patrick Mahomes, as is often the case, is correct.
Yeah, and what are they doing this week? Talking up their 5th string wide receiver, Sky Moore. Oh, no, that was a
He's going to get more opportunities.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
how many he had 1 snap last week?
I think it was like 2, but whatever. He was barely on the field after barely playing in week 1 as well. But here's the thing. It makes sense. You took a guy in round 2. Your receivers currently aren't really jumping off the page.
And a little bit banged up too.
Yeah,
you know?
and it would make sense that the guy you took on day 2 of the draft his role would continue to evolve and expand, and he'll play more. And if he starts to get involved in this rotation, it's just going to be worse. So again, it's like the red light conversation before that we had. Mahomes told us he put the red light in front of us and said, "Don't trust these guys." And we did buy into Juju after week 1, right? He's the only guy that's been over 50 yards among the receivers so far in a game. We bought into it. We ranked him as a wide receiver 3, and it bit us in week 2 because he disappeared. And you're right. It's probably going to be that kind of story all season long, and that's a concern.
Let's get to our primetime game. Stefania's 49ers host the Let's Ride Broncos. Stefania, we'll talk about the lineup blocks here and then get to your injury updates. As far as lineup blocks go in this game, Deebo Samuel and Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams. Deebo Samuel, a top 10 wide receiver option. Sutton at wide receiver 17. And Javonte is running back 11. But there are some notable injuries here, Stefania, including the iffy George Kittle.
Yeah, we have yet to see George Kittle on the field.
Yeah.
But, here's the thing. I think you're going to see him this week. He is back on limited practice. I think that this is going to be the week that George Kittle returns. We'll find out, Friday is a big day, and we'll get a good hint after today. But he has been out doing more this week than he has in the past. George Kittle and Jimmy Garoppolo have quite a rapport. I think if he comes back, this is huge for them. Tyrion Davis-Price, we know he suffered a high ankle sprain last week. He's going to be out. So just a reminder that there's no Tyrion Tyrion Davis-Price. Jeff Wilson Jr. remains the starter there. And then Jerry Jeudy had a chest injury, landed on the ball pretty uncomfortable. Hasn't been able to do anything really. I think Jerry Judy's going to be absent for this game.
This is a Sunday night game, so make sure, like, if you have George Kittle now, like, don't just dump your contingency plan yet,
Right.
because he play on Sunday night. Might be worth keeping somebody if George Kittle is not able to go on Sunday. Let's talk about some of these other players, though, Mike. Jeff Wilson last week kind of looked like what I expected him to look like. A lot of volume, not a ton of passing game work, and other players contributing in the running game.
Yeah, but they don't really have a choice to use him, right? Because everyone else is dropping out of the running back race,
Sure.
essentially. It just has to be him. And we saw a little bit of that last week, 18 carries and 2 targets. He went over 100 yards. The negative, I guess, here is Denver has been really good against the run so far, second fewest fantasy points. That is a little concerning, but at the same time, again, he should handle a bulk of the carries in this game, and that's enough to at least put him in the running back 2 conversation. So that's where I have him. I have him 23rd on my board, so good flex or borderline RB2.
We saw a good version or a better version of Brandon Ayuk in week 2 than we saw in week 1. Maybe the 49ers will finally play a game without rain. That would be nice to see. He's like a low-end flex play, wide receiver 4 right now with Ayuk, just in terms of utilization. We know the skill set is there, but as we saw last year, can't always count on just the skill set to turn into fantasy goodness. And then Russell Wilson, Mike, has not been great so far for the Broncos, and he faces a pretty stiff test on Sunday night. Would you be playing him or no?
Yeah, I mean, I have him 12th, so in 10-team leagues, probably not. Here's the thing. He played Seattle and Houston to open the season, and you would have thought, that's a chance to come out hot, right? Put up a bunch of touchdowns, come out strong, get some chemistry with these receivers, play well. And it hasn't happened there. So what's going to happen against San Francisco?
The really good
if we know
defensive
anything
front.
about fantasy football, 5 touchdowns, right?
Correct,
Naturally.
yes.
But
Yeah.
it's definitely a concern. So I'm downgrading him for now. I want to see him actually come out and put a good game together, because they're struggling with play calling, decision making, production near the goal line. It's just all been bad so far.
Yeah, I think
and
they have.
know him. I think, this is, I can't wait for this matchup. I think the 49ers are going to come out after him hard. It's going to be a tough night for him.
Yeah,
for a
sure
third
will.
week in a
Yeah,
row.
I can imagine the 49ers will be a very spirited bunch on Sunday night playing at home. I believe the
No,
Broncos
they're
have.
at the Broncos.
Oh, the game's with the Broncos. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Playing down in Denver. My bad there.
But,
Still be
lately with the
spirited.
Broncos fans,
Yeah.
the way they have been a little angry, could work in
Is
the
it
49ers
down in
favor.
Denver? It's up in Denver, right? From San Francisco? The map's always weird. Like, is that
It's out in Denver.
out in
They're
Denver?
going-
Like, I'm thinking about where San Francisco is in California. Like,
Well, it might
you
be
said down.
down in the sense that, like, it's further south, but it's up in the sense that altitude wise, it might be
Yeah, well, it
Yeah,
definitely
well,
is
definitely
higher,
is
but I didn't know if it
altitude-wise,
was. Yeah, I don't know.
Geography 101,
Yeah,
apparently
exactly.
a class that all of us skipped during our
Fabulous part of the
formative
podcast.
years.
All right.
Let's do one more matchup, and one more is brought to you by Body Armor. Gear up this fall with Body Armor Sports Drink. It's more than a sports drink. We have Monday Night Football. Da-na-na-na. That's about as far as I can go with the
I
theme.
thought someone just played the theme on the button. That was so good.
I'm pretty much like a musical genius. No big deal. Lineup blocks for this game include Saquon Barkley, and I think it's close. CeeDee Lamb, who's right inside that top 20-ish for wide receivers. He was better last week with Cooper Rush, who earned my respect, that much is for sure. Hey, Stefania, Michael Gallup practiced in full yesterday. What's that mean?
Full pads. They have him going as if they are going to play him on Monday night. Now, I think this could be the case. They have been very open and transparent that this could likely be the case, but they've also said that he will not play a full complement of snaps the first time he goes out. Keep in mind, he's less than 8 months removed from this ACL surgery. It's a little early for a guy who had a calf strain that cost him 7 weeks last year and then followed it up with an ACL tear. I have to admit, I'm concerned about Michael Gallup coming back as early as he is. I understand they're going to cap his workload, but if I were for fantasy purposes, I would certainly be watching the first game and not biting here.
Zeke Elliott will be featured in Liz's Props That Pop article this Saturday. So please check that out from Liz Loza. Mike, it feels like if you're starting either Cowboys running back, it's more because you have to, not because you want to so far.
Yeah, it can't feel great. Zeke is 19th on my board. I'm still buying him as a starter just because of the volume that he is seeing. To some extent, he's still the lead back in this Cowboys offense that's trying to run the ball through him, but it has not gone well so far. He's actually only 15 snaps ahead of Tony Pollard. He's being out-targeted 9-4. So you're not getting passing down work. In fact, he's been a negative, or what does he have? Negative 7 yards on 4
yeah.
targets.
-7 passing.
Yeah,
receiving
they weren't
yards.
really his fault. I did watch all the snaps from
screens
these two
long
guys
enough,
this year.
basically,
Zeke It was the concerns we had in the offseason. He just does not look very explosive. Pollard looks like the better player right now. We'll see how that continues going forward. I mean, it's not like Zeke looks awful to me. He just looks like a guy that's taking what's there, can't do much more. And if you get 15 carries and 2 targets a game, you're going to be on the RB2 radar, and that's it. I don't think he has upside anymore, and he hasn't been top 15 in points per game the last 2 years, so this is not new.
Especially behind an offensive line that is no longer what it was for many years, which was dominant from left to right. Confirmed that Denver is north of San Francisco. Sorry for bothering everybody and wasting 10 seconds of their life by having to confirm that.
You threw me off, messed up the whole show.
CeeDee Lamb had 7 catches last week again. We've got him right there in that wide receiver 2 border. I think that back-to-back games with 10 or more targets for CeeDee Lamb. The volume's really good. And as I just said, Cooper Rush earned my respect last week with the way that he played. He now has 2 starts, has looked serviceable in those 2 starts. So I need to come correct on my evaluation of Cooper Rush. He has played better than I expected him to play.
Plus, they're not going to have Dalton Schultz, most likely. So I would think CeeDee Lamb is probably going to be the favored target here.
20 target game. Get it to him.
No complaints on my end if he sees that. For the Giants, as we know, like we got Kenny Golladay, not quite asking for a trade, but saying he needs to play more after playing barely any snaps.
Yeah.
Well, 1 snap last week.
Probably the most untradeable contract in the NFL right now. It's I mean, if it's not there, it's right on the very short list, an albatross of a deal. So is there any Giants wide receiver that needs to be started, Mike?
Not a must start. I have Shepard 46, but he's trending up 10 targets in week 2, 6 or more in 39 of his past 47 games. He has 14 this year. That's highest on the team.
Yep.
Pretty good.
Coming off the
Happy
Achilles,
for him.
it's shocking, but he's a really good player. And Daniel Jones loves him, as just shown by that target set. He just keeps going to him. That's his guy. And I think over time, that's going to lead to consistent flex value, maybe wide receiver 3 value. He was a wide receiver 1 the first couple of weeks of last season. So I like him. He's a name that's still available in a lot of leagues.
Reasonable end of bench stash, right?
Yeah,
reasonable.
on your
And
bench
Michael
for sure.
Gallup, by the way, I would not be afraid to go grab him. Not play him, but grab him, have him available because he's a really good player that sooner rather than later could be in the lineup for 60% of the snaps, maybe even more as that knee gets better and better and better. Hey, we did it. We made it through a show. That was pretty good right there, huh? Reminder that if you missed Thursday's show, 4 game previews tucked into the Thursday show. At the end of it, we're splitting things up a little bit to get through as much as we possibly can. He is Mike. She is Stefania. I am Field. We're back Sunday morning. Fantasy Football Now, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. Full 3-hour show on our normal network. We look forward to that already. In the meantime, good luck with your college football bets on Saturday. Read all the content. You're betting on it too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Go Stanford. Go Princeton. Go all the teams. Go
Canes.
Kutztown.
Go
Go Kutztown.
Go Kutztown. Go
Marshall.
Wesleyan. We'll talk to you guys here on this show on Monday. For Mike and Stefania, I'm Field. We'll talk to you then. Who's Kutztown playing this week? Who's Kutztown playing this week? Do you know?
Good question.
Wow, you seem like a really good alumni.